Good evening, and welcome to part 2 of our 3-part series on opioid addiction, treatment, and recovery. I am Deacon Bernard Butler of St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church, located at 7101 Carnegie Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio, where I currently serve as the Acting Executive Director of the Light of Cleveland Incorporated, a community development corporation created by St. Timothy to address some of the challenges and issues we face in our community. Today's session is titled Heroin, Fentanyl, and Painkillers, the Battle of Your Life. Our prayer is that this session will be a benefit and a blessing to our entire community. Well, now let's get started.
Good evening. I would like to thank everyone for joining us in the recording today as we engage in an educational offering regarding opiate addiction with a focus on the disease of addiction, associated behaviors, and common opiates used as part of this lifestyle. We will look at this through the lens of several people, including someone who fought the addiction and got out of it alive and is doing well, Jocelyn. And I have to also mention it's a belated birthday to you. Your birthday was yesterday, so happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
As I said before, I don't believe any true discussion can be had without some learning, sharing of information, thoughts, ideas, and experiences related to the subject matter. The different piece we'll have today is the sharing of experience. This is a critical need in our community, believe it or not. We will share intimate information today and have some, as the kids call it, real talk. I believe in the sharing and discussing, we have the ability to uncover some hidden bias we may have regarding addiction and those who struggle with the disease of opiate disorder. You know, the lifestyle is shrouded in secrecy, and we don't help it because we stigmatize that person who's struggling with addiction. They start hiding because they have this guilt and they have shame. Out of this discussion, maybe someone will find an answer that sets them free. And all right, I can feel myself getting a little preachy, so I'm going to move away from that and say, let's take care of some housekeeping items. First, this presentation is being hosted by the Light of Cleveland Corporation, an LLC affiliated with St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church. I'm proud that the body of Christ has agreed to come to the table and at least begin a dialogue about addiction. This is a faith-based initiative with underwriting by the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. By way of introduction, I am Jeffrey Sims. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner specializing in adult psychiatry, and I also treat those who are addicted. And then I have with me to my far left, Shadina Terry, who's also a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and she's been by my side for many years. I won't say how many, yeah. And you listen, she is a wealth of information and knowledge. And I have to say, if I was struggling with mental health, which many people say I am, I would see her as a practitioner. And then to my immediate left, I have Jocelyn McCain, who is a lifelong friend. We go back to the childhood. And Jocelyn struggled with addiction, and she came out on the other side. I must say that she's also a wealth of information. Sometimes when I'm struggling with some cases, I would go to her and say, hey, what's your idea on this type of treatment? I will say something about Jocelyn. She can tell you some stories that will make your hair curl. But for the sake of the audience, I ask her to make sure all of her stories are PG version. So, ladies, would you please do me the honor by doing a brief introduction, and then let's dive into the material because we have a lot of ground to cover and a short time to get home. It's like, you know, when we were kids, you had to be on the porch by the time the lights went on, you know, so the street lights. So the brief introduction because we have the street lights coming. All right, Shadina.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And yes, my introduction will be brief. As Jeff indicated, I'm a nurse practitioner that specializes in behavior health. I've worked in that area for 30 plus years and had a variety of direct care positions. I might add that many of the patients I've cared for were often duly diagnosed. I would always try to determine which came first, the substance use or the behavioral component. Never could really figure it out. In the past, we were to treat the substance use and then treat the behavior piece. But since then, we've learned that in order for treatment to be effective, you must treat them both. So that's just a little bit about me and the type of care I've given. I'm going to pass the baton over to Jocelyn.
Thanks, Shadina. Well, hello, my name is Jocelyn, and today I stand as a mother and a grandmother, and actually I'm a mommy again. I'm raising two minor grandchildren. I'm a student, and I'm working with a session group to help those who struggle with addiction. I'm here to share my testimony and to give insight and hope that if I can make it, you can make it too. I'm here to share my experience, my strength, and my hope.
All right. So you did a better job than I ever would have done in the introduction, and I think we now know each other. So I want to open this educational offering by playing a game. And I'm going to say, I'm unabashed that I stole this game and this approach from one of my mentors, a Dr. Dallas Reyes. She's a psychiatrist and addiction specialist. And she did a presentation recently, about a couple weeks ago, and she opened with this game. And it actually opened my eyes and to my own personal bias against those who might be struggling with addiction. So the game is called Guess What I'm Thinking. So,
All right.
so here's how we play it.
Okay.
I will ask a question, and you will give me the first thing that comes to your mind, the first thought you have. And I want those in the audience to play along with us as well. Think about it. The question and the first thing that comes to your mind. I'm going to start with Shadina.
Ooh,
Here we go.
okay. All right.
Shadina,
Yes.
heroin addicts are what?
Ooh. Um, ooh. Controlled. They are controlled by the drug. The drug controls them. It controls anyone that has any connection with them. It controls that individual's employment, the family, every aspect of their life. So when I think of opiate addiction, it's control.
Okay. Josh, I'll kick it over to you. Heroin addicts are what?
Thieves.
Okay.
And I say that because I remember when, and if you couldn't get some, that's what most of the guys did. Girls too.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So here we see why the game is is kind of effective because it's getting to what we're thinking. Here's the second one. I wouldn't hire a person addicted to pain pills or struggling with addiction because, Jocelyn.
Like I said, thievery. I'd be scared that they would maybe hurt me, and I knew they'd take my money, but hurt me too. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Wow. There's a theme there.
I'm saying very constant.
Yeah.
Thief, thief, thief.
Shadina?
See, and I see it so different. I mean, I've worked with, and I've had contact with so many addicts over the years that I know it's so important for them to have some type of work because that work helps them with the self-esteem. And that's something that typically people shun away from. So I would hire an addict. Now, with that being said, I'm not foolish. I would really monitor them closely, but I really would hire them. So little different thought.
All right. My third question, get a little deeper. The best solution for addiction is what, Shadina?
Treatment.
Hmm?
Treatment in a safe environment. Um, treatment in an environment that is free of drugs. Most of the treatment centers are in drug infested areas, and also treatment that lasts more than 3 days.
All right. The best solution for addiction, Jocelyn?
Surrender. You know, you have to come to the point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You want to live differently. There's more than that life.
So,
That's what I would say.
yeah, okay, surrender.
Yes.
My last question, and let's see how we fare on this, because you started pretty punitive, and then you kind of moved towards, hey, treatment. Heroin addicts deserve what, Jocelyn?
Compassion. Compassion. Um, it's a mental disease. It's you broken inside, and people don't realize that you reached your point where you can't deal with emotions, so you run and you escape. So I would say compassion.
Okay, Shadina.
I mean, I definitely would agree with the compassion piece, but I'm going to go right back to treatment. Treatment.
I do it.
Gotta have treatment.
And again, the purpose of this exercise was to kind of get the real feelings about addiction and those who struggle with drug use and abuse on the table. Um, I appreciate people are in different camps regarding opiate addiction and treatment, and these competing views or camps bring natural tension with those who interact with the person who's struggling with addiction. That includes family, friends, co-workers, and certainly treatment providers. I want to say that if you believe a person is a thief and they're trying to control, and then when you go in to provide them treatment, what do you say? I'm gonna hide my purse and my wallet, and I mean it actually. Hey, people who struggle with addiction are not void of conscious or mind. They actually can pick a person who is authentic. They know when they see the real. And so the response will be the response that you give them. So anyone who is part of the opiate addict's personal space, their circle, they know what you feel about them, even though we're trying to hide it. So again, I want to say, think about it. Think about it in your practice. Think about it when you come to an interface with them. Think about it at the family gatherings when you're kind of looking at them like, oh, I'm going to try to avoid Johnny because Johnny's going to ask me for some money. So Johnson, I don't know, what do you think about what I'm saying? Those feelings do show.
Yes, they do. And I guess I should speak up first because I have on the job training with addiction. I've been there. And you are right, people can be cruel and they deal with you and that includes the way that they deal with you, and that includes people on the street. When you're out there in the elements, you get a lot of behaviors and people in clinics and detox or in treatment. And not all the people, but many of them. You have to be a special person to deal with an addict. You better be on your game because we can come hard and we want what we want. And we will get it by any means necessary. I don't blame anyone for my addiction, but I do know people can make it hard to get treatment. Anyway, addicts do a good job beating up on themselves. We don't need any help in that area. I had to come to the realization that I needed treatment. I needed help. I couldn't beat this. I was powerless. I was an addict. And I had to turn to God. And that was the only way that I felt like I could get out.
Wow.
I got real and raw. I
Wow.
told him exactly how I was feeling and begged out. Yep.
So when I think of drug addiction, I think about a chemical overload, and I think you kind of spoke about that. All drugs, including opiates, directly or indirectly floods the brain's reward center with a chemical called dopamine. That chemical has many purposes, but for our discussion today, it specifically controls your emotion, your motivation, and feelings of pleasure. When you use drugs like opiates, it overstimulates the reward center and produces euphoria and teaches the person to repeat this behavior to get the same response. Now, this is addiction, but I'd like to give you a little example, one that I think about, one that I use. So, you have a chocolate cake.
Mm.
It's a good chocolate cake, one that your mama made,
Mm.
the best chocolate cake ever.
Mm.
You take a slice of that chocolate cake, and then you put the chocolate cake up. And you eat that slice, and oh my goodness, you're enjoying it. And then you think, well, I'm not going to eat, put it up for later. Then your mind tell you,
Mm.
wouldn't another piece be good? And you get it.
Mm.
And that's that reward, that pleasure reward. You're eating that chocolate cake, dopamine is kind of firing off, and dopamine is firing off, and that reward center says, good.
Well, you just only got 2 pieces of cake.
Well, for the purposes of this, I only got 2. I didn't want to tell everybody I ate the whole cake.
Right.
Well, you know, Shadina, you did a great job. I brought me a little prop, and I don't want to hit the mic, but I want to show this. Where would I put that? Right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. And it is a picture of the brain. I'm sorry I did that. And I brought the prop because I wanted to illustrate the fact that addiction is a disease. And the brain is at the center of this disease. Not unlike diabetes, which involves the pancreas, or hypertension, which involves the kidneys sometimes. The addiction is an organ disease. And can we all agree that at the center of the disease is the brain? And we should not discriminate. We don't discriminate against a person who is asking or needs insulin to treat their diabetes, or they need metformin or pill to treat their diabetes. Why are we discriminating against the person who has an addiction? And that's my thought about that. So I solely support what you're saying, Shadina. It is an addiction, and it does involve chemicals. So,
yeah.
Joss, what do
Yeah.
you think?
Okay, I can go with the chemical part, but that does not explain the behavior. I mean, the drug drags you out of bed at night. You know, it makes you go into abandoned houses and sit with people that you don't know and use with them. I started using only on weekends. I was a mother and had always been a productive person, so no way will I use during business time, I thought. The using continued and the monster grew. I started using a lot. I was what you call a binger. I would go without for periods. And then when I used big. I used days, not stopping. You know, I would go for periods, like I said, for, maybe 2 months, something like that. But then I would start again. And once I did start, I couldn't stop. I used as long as my body would hold up. I OD'd twice. My behaviors became strange. I isolated from what I call you normal people.
Normies.
You normies. I used weak people when or if I needed. I felt like no one really cared, so I didn't either. About myself, that is. I feel alone, misunderstood, abused, and hurt. So to keep from dealing with things that happen to me, I just needed to escape thoughts, even if only for a little while. But as we know, I got hooked. I tried treatment and was successful. I completed a 1.5 year rigorous treatment program. I received approval, or what you guys call a certificate. Life went on and I got married, and that was the wrong thing or the wrong person. He was very abusive to me and my children. I had to escape the pain again, so I relapsed. I got to a really bad space, not caring if I died. It got that bad. But I did. I had a mask on. No one knew. I wasn't suicidal, like killing myself. But in reality, that's exactly what it amounts to. Until I surrendered and accepted the reality that I wanted and needed help. And I found the only way out of that mental prison was to surrender.
Wow. So people, places, and things, you hear
Yes.
that all the time.
Yes.
But I have a question to ask you. I heard you say that your husband was a trigger for your relapse.
Yes.
Did you know, or was he a user?
Yes, he was a user. He was a isolated user, should I say?
Wow.
I didn't know that he
Okay.
was using
Mm-hmm.
until one of the kids brought it to my attention, and they said, "Look, mommy," and I looked in the backyard, and there were garbage cans. They were full of beer cans, and then I saw other stuff, and I was amazed because he hit it.
Wow.
Yeah,
That had to be devastating.
it was.
And you think about it, just like many times when we see people who are abusing substances, they kind of link themselves with other people. They might know and they might not know that they're
Mm-hmm.
using, but there's this affinity for these individuals to kind of link up together,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things we struggle with.
But you know what? He's always been a hard worker.
Hmm.
He would go to work. He
Hmm.
had a really good job with a prestigious company.
Hmm.
So I mean, you get your clothes on every day. So I didn't see it.
Hmm.
Or maybe I didn't want to see it. I don't know.
Ah. And so there, that kind of leads me to the other question.
Hmm.
What would be, what about the children?
Yeah, Shadina. I still deal with that. Because even though I'm in recovery, there's a lot of wreckage from my using. I never thought that I was hurting the children, because you had food, you had cable, you had stuff. I didn't think about that. You had each other. You know, I was truly in the depths of self centeredness. You know, pour me, pour me, pour me a drink, and then all from there. You know what I mean? So, yeah, there's still wreckage. But every day they get hope and they come borrow money or give me money or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
it's a good thing.
I asked that question because substance abuse was pervasive in my family as well.
Mm.
It really was, and I remember some of the times. I remember feeling resentful about money that wasn't there, coats and violins and things that were stolen, Christmases where, as the oldest sibling, I couldn't get toys and just those type of things. So I remember that resentfulness. It got better. It did get better, and I eventually forgot some of those memories, but it does impact the children.
Well, the only thing that I can say and what I asked my children was to forgive me. I told them, I said, mommy was sick for a long time. My mind,
Mhm.
and I asked for forgiveness. I was sick. I wasn't well. So could you guys understand that? I know I hurt you, but please forgive me. That's all I could do. I live every day to the fullest. you know?
Yeah, and you kind of close that chapter. I still believe that even though, you've asked for forgiveness, there are these things that, children, kind of remember.
Yeah.
And then at certain times, those things are, kind of come to the surface during stressful times, during, a crisis,
Yes.
it comes to the surface. And then some are not in the place or in the place to forgive at that time, so it still is there, but you still work on it.
Yeah.
I would most certainly agree. One of the reasons that I don't treat substance abusers is because I'm afraid of possible countertransference because of the experiences that I lived. It doesn't mean that I haven't forgotten them or that I can't move forward. I'm just fearful at this point.
Down at the surface, yeah. Well, I mean that was kind of a pretty intense discussion. I want to pivot just for a second because it's all about me again. So I want to talk about something that I'm struggling with in my practice. So
Sorry,
bring it right
Jocelyn.
back in. Yeah, it's all about me. So one thing I struggle with is this compulsive behavior of addiction. And what I mean by that is the person continues to use despite knowing the negative consequence of their using. So this is what I'm going to say. They know that they might die from using fentanyl, but they use it anyway. Or they know that they might contract um, hepatitis C or HIV because of the IV drug use and sharing of needles, but they do it anyway. And I have a client, and I have several, but a client specifically, that they were, using the same area in their arm to, access the vein, and they got this sore on their arm. I mean, a huge sore. It's called an abscess, to the point that it became infected and it was oozing pus, and they would come in, and I'm like, and it really kind of bothered me. And I'm like, first of all, you need to go to the emergency room like yesterday
Yes.
because you're really sick, sicker than you know. But they continue to do it, and I guess I would ask, what about this compulsive piece of addiction, this compulsive behavior? What would you say about that, Jocelyn?
I would say the drug is stronger than the consequences, no matter how bad. It's as she said, that pleasure center, that's inside, and that's what we want. Uh, the thing with drug addiction is it starts mental. You know, uh, what I learned about myself is each episode of pain, it broke me, and I escaped through using drugs. I ran.
Yeah.
I ran away. I didn't want to deal with it, so I bounced.
And we know that, because, growing up together, you would bounce,
Yeah.
to take you, like, Jocelyn, are you coming back? I'll be right back. And 3 months later, we would reconnect.
Yeah.
I have a little educational piece I need to do. So let's move away from the dialogue for just a second because I need to put this in. I want to talk about opiates because we use the term, but again, opiates is a a lot of things are under the umbrella of opiates. So when we talk about opiates, we're talking about pain pills. First of all, the most commonly used for addicts are Percocet, Vicodin, oxycodone, and OxyContin. And then when we move to street drugs, we talk about heroin and fentanyl. And again, this is all under the umbrella of opiates. So the pain pills are used for severe pain, not just for bumping your toe or having a tooth pain, but those are the ones that they use commonly to abuse. So, and you will see that with people who have overdoses, and unfortunately, you'll see that with people who have died based on their overuse. And again, it's not just Percocet, but it's Percocet and cocaine, or fentanyl and a benzodiazepine. What do I mean by benzodiazepine? I'm sorry. Like Valium. So fentanyl and Valium, Ativan. On the street, they call it Xan bars, so Xanax. So those are those ones that you often see when the person is overdosed and taken to the emergency room, or the autopsy shows that they have those things in their systems. So, and then I want to talk about fentanyl really because that's the drug that's hot on the street, as I call it. It's a synthetic opioid, which is 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine and heroin. I talked about this in my last series, but I want to say it again because it's out there. And the way you use these opiates, you can, one, ingest them, swallow them, two, snort them, put them up your nose, three, smoke them, and then we talked about the IV use where you liquefy them and then put them in your vein. And so that is your worst nightmare. Last little plug I want to put in for numbers and data, because I'm a geek, I'm a data guy. I'm going to talk again about, overdose in Cuyahoga County, and that's why we're here. And we're talking about, Cleveland as well. There's a report called the Overdose Fatality Review report. It's a Cuyahoga County report that covers overdose fatalities. I'm talking about death for 5 years, 2016 to 2021. And so, not to have you have your eyes glaze over because you're bored, I'm just going to talk about 3 years, and I'll talk about 2019. You had 431 fentanyl deaths and 119 heroin deaths due to fentanyl, 431, heroin, 119. And then in 2020, you had 416 fentanyl deaths and 51 heroin deaths. And so, yeah, so you're like, hey, one thing I was like, oh, wow, it's coming down. We should celebrate whatever we did. We did a good job and we should do more of that. Unfortunately, this report says in 2021, the first quarter, just 3 months, you had 395 fentanyl fatalities and 148 heroin fatalities. And I'm like, my goodness, I can't believe we're on this surge, we're on this upward trend again, and that's only 3 months. So where are we now in July, and where will we be in December of 2021? And I guess what I really want to know is what's the reason for this recent surge or increase in the abuse and the death toll with these medications
Well,
or drugs?
first of all, I just want to go back a little bit to a couple of years back, maybe 5-10 years ago. I remember many of the accrediting agencies, we were working on the floor with the clients, and a patient would come up and they'd say, hey, I got a headache. And the agents would say, you have to stop the pain. So give them what they need. And so we'd give them a Tylenol, and the patient would say, Tylenol didn't work. So the doctor would then say, well, if the Tylenol didn't work, let me give you something else. And so he'd give them a Percocet. We're smart. We're very smart. So they'd say, hey, well, guess what? Those Percocets didn't work. And so then the doctor would give something else. So I think we contributed to the monster then that we have now. So that's just one statement. Now, I don't have any research data on what I'm getting ready to say, so this is all me. But I look at the impact that COVID had on treatment, on individuals as a whole. We as mental health providers saw an increase in depression because of the isolation. Individuals weren't able to get to their providers. They need that one-to-one, especially if you are a substance user. You need that contact. You need those groups. all those weren't available anymore. So, what do? They're isolating themselves. Let me see, what do I do? Maybe smoke a little bit. But I think not only did COVID help push the numbers up a little bit, but the government, in all of their wisdom, gave everyone a check. And that check said, food or fun? And I think, unfortunately, a lot of folks use money for drugs. So, I mean, this is not research data. I want to say that. This is
It's in your humble
data.
opinion.
Yeah.
Your humble opinion. You think that. Well, I do know that whole thing about pain being the fifth vital sign, and that the providers, were responsible for, prescribing a lot of those things, and we need to take responsibility for that, and we have, but I think we've swung to the other end of the continuum, where we're not treating pain at all, and we become we scrutinize our practice more, and we are less likely to provide, pain medications. So that's the other part of it,
I agree.
that's getting, out of hand as well, and then clients are complaining about it. I'm gonna move away from that discussion because you were talking about the stimulus check, and I was concerned. So I'm gonna move to something else called relapse. And again, here's one of my concerns that I have. We talked about the drug use and awakening and having a nightmare, but relapse, I view this more as a Frankenstein. And when I say a Frankenstein, I'm talking about like the 50s and 60s Frankenstein, not these new age Frankenstein. If you remember the old Frankenstein, this person had multiple body parts that were sewn together with mother's love, with the threads and stuff like that. And this Frankenstein always kind of walked in a slow, plodding manner, like side to side, real slow. And he was always chasing a damsel in distress. And so the damsel is running real fast, and she's doing well, and she's getting away. And Frankenstein is still going slow and plodding. And you know how Frankenstein was always successful in capturing the damsel? The damsel would fall. And still be going slow, and trying to get on her. And the problem with the damsel, she would just lay there and yell, help, help, instead of getting up and start running again. And I think with the relapse, we have individuals who fall, and instead of getting up, they lay there and they just yell, help, help. And let me just step back and talk about treatment. I feel that relapse is a part of treatment. I expect some of my individuals to relapse. I expect them to fall. But for God's sakes, I don't want them just to lay there and yell, but I want to help them get up and seek treatment. So that concept is true for the opiate addicted. It's true for those who are struggling with cocaine or any addiction. Don't lay there and yell. Yes, I agree with the pleasurable, reward center being hit by dopamines, but when you relapse, you got to get up. So I don't know, Josh, what do you think about? I want to hear what you think about relapse.
Well, I can somewhat agree with that statement. I want to add the relapse comes when you take your eyes off the prize. If you want to be sober, you have to make that the major thing in your life. You got to do it. You have to avoid people, places, and things. And just say you go back to see Barbara, you just a thought comes to your head. Let me go down there and check on Sharon. Just fictitious names, But if it takes you back mentally, then you're gonna act out. You have to avoid people, places, and things,
Mhm.
especially freshly in your recovery. And then the longer you go, you'll not want to go back down to see Barbara and all the rest of
So
them.
you need some distance between
Yeah,
you
yes,
and that
exactly,
person. Yeah, I agree with
and
that.
that's where she came in, where she talked about treatment
Mhm.
and in different facilities. You know, getting away. Most of the treatment facilities are in the hoods,
Mhm.
and it's access to dope in the hoods. You know, so she made some valid points on that. You know, and I just have to say that my relapse came when I started to fool myself, you know, and I started believing it, you know. I would mentally say some things to myself, and it sounded good.
Mhm.
It sounded good to me. So I went along with it, and then I was back out again. You know, let me tell you one story I had, and this is a true story. I went and bought me what we call a 20, and I had a $20 bill. So I thought that this would cure me if I saw how fast my money went. This was gonna cure me. So I put what I did, how I did it, and then I lit the bill. Meantime, I'm still doing what I was doing, but I watched the $20 bill burn, and I thought that that would cure me. I really did. You talking about crazy?
That's called distorted
That
thinking.
was
And
crazy.
it's a symptom of substance abuse.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
you you get these thoughts.
Hmm.
You tell a fib
Mhm.
to your family. Your
Hmm.
family know it's a fib. You know it's a fib, but then you told that fib so many times, you get to believe in
Believe in
it.
it. Yeah.
So it's that distorted thinking. It's
Hmm.
a
Hmm. And I was mad too, because I ain't had no more money.
It's- So, kind of help me understand your story. I think I got it, but let me just make sure I heard what you said.
what
So,
I don't have.
yeah. So you were using,
Mhm.
and you were using on this side, and
Mhm.
your thinking. You
Mhm.
said, "Let me set a $20 bill on
Yes.
fire,
Yes.
so I can see how quick my money
Yes.
goes based on my drug use."
Yes. You get it?
Not really, but I mean, first of all, why couldn't you just tear up the $20 bill? Because you can't put that burnt up $20 bill
Right.
back together. So I
I
guess
know it's
I
crazy.
mean, and that's true that there is a distortion in your thinking,
Yeah.
and the question becomes which one went first, the burnt up $20 bill or what you had in that pipe
That $20 bill
went
went up
first. All
so
right, I
fast.
got it.
And I was mad after.
I would have been mad as well if I was giving up $20 bills like that. But it reminds me, Johnson, and I want to spend a little time on this. I think we have some time. That like I think it was this week we went down to the homeless shelter.
Yeah.
And there was this guy down there. So we had this group, but this guy stayed around to the end.
Mm.
And you were doing your thing with this guy. You were kind of, ministering to him and instilling hope and saying, hey, if I can do it, you can do it as well.
Mm.
And then I was just watching the exchange in between you and him. But he said something in that exchange, which really, it took me a while in my little, adult brain to kind of understand what he said. And I don't know if you remember what he said. He said, my using drugs is not a problem for me. It's a problem for everybody else. And I'm like, and so you all kept talking. I'm like, what did he just say? And then eventually it dawned on me, and I was like an epiphany, or like the little bubble across above your head, like, wait, he just said,
He said, I'm fine.
I'm fine with
Fine
my
with it.
using.
Yeah.
It's you all
Yeah.
that's struggling with it.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like, that whole point was like, I am not ready to give up my drugs.
Mhm.
And I thought that was, wow, how profound, but how sad.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I don't know, Shadina, what do you think about that story?
it was just like kicking me in the tummy.
Hmm.
I mean, when you said that, he has no idea how families feel and how hopeless and powerless and helpless we feel when our loved ones are involved with drugs and there is nothing we can do. And so it felt like you just kicked me in my stomach. And then I also remember when I see those individuals, remember in the past I would get angry. I would just be so angry, very resentful, because you are telling me you don't want to stop using, but I'm the one that's suffering because of your use. So just lots of feelings there.
Yeah.
But you know what, Shadina? What has to be done is forgiveness. Forgiveness, because it's a disease. And you have to free yourself by forgiving. Because if you don't, you're going to stay in anger and bitterness. That'll hurt you. You know, forgiveness is freedom for you. You can say it to the person, but it's, I forgive you.
But so I understand the forgiveness piece, but I guess what I'm talking about is that, you know, I think Shadina brings up a valid point about the family struggle with addiction.
Yes.
And so you see that, you know, the negative impact drug use is having on the person, and you want to help them. I know they're not ready, but you want to help them. And so when they're killing themselves, you know, literally killing themselves, as you said, you know, through the drug use, they lost a lot of weight. They start at 300, and the next time you see them, they're at 130. That's painful. And, you know, or when they start having depression, you know, and you're having depression too. You're both having depression. That's painful. And what I think of it, and again, you're right. The drug is stronger than, you know, than the negative consequence. But I look at it that there's collateral damage.
Absolutely.
Like you're struggling, you're having trouble with addiction, but right along with you, so is mama,
And
brother, cousin,
right.
Children.
nephew, the children. And that's what, you know, when he said that, that's actually where I kind of got stuck. I wasn't angry, I was just shocked, one, that he talked about a lack of readiness. Two, I thought about, this is a young man, and where is he at?
Yeah, you're right.
He's in a homeless shelter.
He was fine.
So, and he was fine
He
with
said he
it,
was
but I
fine.
bet you his family was struggling with it. You know, I know if I had a family member and I had a house and they were in a homeless shelter, it would torture me. It would torment me. But again, you're right. We have to get to the place where we have to say, that's where they're at, you know, and we have to leave them there, you know, and then hopefully, you know, that they will come to this place of readiness, and then they'll seek treatment.
And that's the hardest thing for family to do, is to get to that place where they have to push the family member out and they have to give themselves some space. It's so hard.
It is hard, you know, but going back to the wreckage of our past, you know, being in addiction, it's hard really to deal with when you're on the side too, you know, because you know that you created hurt for your children and your family and your friends, you know, because you guys do worry about us, but we're so isolated in our minds that we don't feel it, you know. It's a numbing thing.
And that's also part of the distorted thinking, whereas the family's saying we're trying to help, but, you know, and we're helping, you know, exactly. And they're so that's that. We gotta move on. I mean, we have two more big subjects to cover. And I want to talk about treatment. So we were talking about that young man not being ready. We're not going to spend a lot of time on treatment, because our last presentation will be devoted solely to this area of treatment, aftercare, and recovery. But let me just say this about treatment. It can take place in different settings. First, I'll talk about the inpatient setting for treatment. That's usually a hospital or a detox. And often it's a crisis that leads that person to treatment, such as an overdose or the family member saying, hey, if you don't go and get some treatment, you gotta, I'm gonna leave you, or you're gonna be put out of the house. Um, Sometimes it's the court saying, if you don't go and seek treatment, you go into the hoosgow. So it's there, and I like the inpatient treatment approach because it actually interrupts the cycle of use. So you take the person out of the environment, you put them in the hospital or the detox center, and so they're away from the environment, they're away from the substance itself, they are away from the people, places, and things that you all talked about quite a bit. And what's front and center is their recovery. And so that's the benefit of inpatient treatment. Unfortunately, there are times when you're seeking inpatient treatment and it's not available.
Yeah, I was just gonna
Go ahead.
say that,
Mhm.
there were times with some well-known facilities in Cleveland, Ohio. I called, I at that time I wanted out, I wanted help, and I got some people who didn't have a lot of compassion, and you have to call back. We're not taking any more, and I'm like, okay, so here I go again.
So, what was your response to when you got that rejection?
I wouldn't use
That's that's exactly that's it. And that, I mean, that's actually a powerful statement, Jocelyn,
Yeah.
that you're saying that, hey, it is this timing. It has to kind of line up when you're ready, and that the resources need to be there. And that's one of the things we talked about in the previous setting, that the resources, if they're not there, it's problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so we move from the inpatient to the outpatient, and outpatient treatment is beneficial as well. We work in an outpatient setting, but people have competing demands when it's an outpatient setting. So you have to have your treatment, but you also have to go to work, or you have to have your treatment and you have to still take the kids to school or whatever, or there's treatment and you have to go to family commitments, or there's treatment and then the old mama called them old haunts, those old people, places, and things start calling and say, hey, why don't you come back here? So outpatient treatment is effective, but it is limited, and there is this tension between the person and the things that they need to do. But what do you think about that, Johnson? How do they have to look at their treatment?
When you were saying about all this stuff, as an addict, it feels like you're overloaded. Seriously, and I recommend outpatient treatment after inpatient treatment. Because you really have to have one-on-one time. You can't just, no.
And you have to make the main thing.
Yeah.
The main
The
thing.
main thing.
Yeah. So, like, although there's competing demands,
Right.
but what about your recovery?
Right.
That should be the number one.
Right. Because if you don't have that, you're not gonna have the kids in school or the job or whatever it entails.
You might not be alive.
Right. That too. Yeah.
And when you were using, you didn't worry about those things.
Exactly.
See, that's the key.
Those
when you
weren't
were using,
demands.
you didn't worry about it.
Exactly.
So I need to kind of hurry. So the outpatient treatment, that it can occur in the clinic, as I said before, a private office, or part of an outpatient facility of a hospital. Like Metro Health has a robust outpatient treatment, and it's an effective intervention. Again, the key is you have to be ready, which leads me to this discussion on acceptance. So we talked about a treatment, and now, Johnson,
That would be me again.
I want you to talk to us and give us some of the final words about acceptance, and how do you reach that point in your recovery?
Well, acceptance comes with surrender. I feel it's a journey. The obsession and compulsion of using and efforts and to get your drug of choice is a lot on a person. Anyway, it brought me to accept that I needed and I desired a lifestyle change. We call it sick and tired of being sick and tired. Honestly, I prayed and I saw help. I admitted the drug. One, I lost control. I wanted it back. I wanted my life back. I tried meetings and treatment, and it helped. But the real help came from the women's group. It was recovery related, but spiritually guided. I found out as Bill from AA based a big book on spiritual principles. That is a rule. I needed more depth, which takes me to my spirituality, which leads me to God. There are still principles that need daily practice, and rehabs and meetings help get you to the root, who is ultimately God. I am no saint and I don't claim to be. I mess up and I need strength in a lot of areas of my life. The thing is, I keep marching and I keep trying and forgetting my past, forgetting those things that are behind me. When it tries to come back, I do something different. I'm in school, so I read, and if it's loud, I read out loud. I talk to my therapist. Whatever I do, I keep moving. I keep trying. I would like to say one more thing, if you will, for the addicts. There is hope. You can overcome by prayer and perseverance and forgiving and forgetting the things that are behind you. Take one step at a time. Do the work needed to help you keep moving forward. For the advocates/helpers, for people with this disease, remember, humility and compassion are needed by you. You are in a position to help, and you do not know the plans God has for these people with this disease. Let's go a step further by saying this is. So do the job that God Almighty has commissioned you to, advocacy. To the families that love us, I know it's hard to see someone you care about not caring about themselves or you guys. There are groups for that. You can share and unload your toll with others that are going through the same thing. Keep praying and get a church home. After all, church is nothing but a hospital for the spirit to help you get stronger and to introduce you to our Lord and Savior, who, by the way, is our only hope. God bless you all, and I send you peace, strength, and protection. Amen.
Thanks, Jocelyn.
Yeah.
I got the cue that we're almost done. So after that, I only want to say I thank you, ladies, for sharing your knowledge and most of all your experience in engaging in the dialogue. I want to thank you for the community for engaging in this educational opportunity. You all did a great job, by the way. I felt right at home. Hopefully, we did provide some additional enlightenment and information regarding treatment resources. We thank the Light of Cleveland Corporation and St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church, the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and certainly the Ascension Group for selecting us to host this event. I don't know about you, but that hour went by fast. The presentation will be aired on several platforms, will be aired by the Ascension Group via Zoom on August the 7th and August the 12th, 7 to 8 p.m. We will host a Q&A on those dates as well. And then St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church will air on Facebook and KAZ Radio on August the 14th from 7 to 8 p.m. again. So look for and avail yourself of those dates. Also, I want to put a shameless plug in for our last offering, opiate treatment and aftercare and recovery, featuring Dr. Neera Gupta, the Medical Director of Recovery Resources. Her presentation will be aired on August the 19th and the 24th via Zoom, 7 to 8 p.m. And again, by St. Timothy Missionary Baptist Church on August the 27th from 7 to 8 p.m. Lastly, I would like to thank each of you who joined us, and I thank you for your most valuable commodity, which is time. Thanks again.